On November 16th, 1992, at approximately 8:45 p.m., Jeffrey Lassiter and Sharon Hagebuck were fatally shot at Lassiter's apartment at 910 West Agatite in Chicago. The manager of the building heard the shots, discovered the victims, and called the police immediately. The police arrived around 9:10. Remember this time frame. On December 3rd, 1992, over 2 weeks after the crime, the police arrested 15-year-old Lewis Gardner and 19-year-old Akia Phillips on drug charges. After interrogations, the two boys falsely claimed guilt in the murders and implicated Paul Phillips, Dion Patrick, Daniel Taylor, and 3 other men. You can read more in this book about the pressure-filled interrogations that led them all to signing on to the same false version of events. I am going to be talking more about Daniel Taylor's case because I was one of his attorneys, and Daniel's case is the key to all the cases eventually being overturned. But I mean no disrespect to the other men who also wrote this book and what they have endured. 17-year-old Daniel had grown up in foster care and was a ward of the state at the time of his arrest. He had lived in a dozen foster homes over the years. In other words, he had no adult to look out for him or advocate for him. At 3 a.m., he was awakened by police at the group home he was staying at, handcuffed, thrown into a squad car, taken to the police station, subjected to physical and psychological abuse, and told his friends had all given the same story, implicating him also. Daniel eventually agreed to sign on to the false confession when he was told he could go home if he did so. After he had given the false confession, he asked if he could go home now. He was told, "You just confessed to a double homicide. You are never going home." Then Daniel was thinking, and even though it had been over 2 weeks, he thought he remembered that he had been in lockup in a different police station on a disorderly conduct charge the night of the murders. So he told the police to check into that. The police did follow up on this and later found his arrest report and a copy of his bond slip for November 16th, the night of the murders, showing he had been arrested at 6:45 p.m. and released on bond at 10 p.m., clearly covering the time of the crime. At this point, the prosecutors could have dismissed Daniel, maybe apologized to him, but they had a problem. All the other young men who had been arrested had signed on to the same story, which included Daniel having a prominent role in the killings. If Daniel hadn't been there, all these cases would then be unwinnable. So, instead, they found other witnesses to lie to weaken Daniel's alibi. Adrian Grimes was facing a serious drug conviction when the police offered him a deal on his case if he would say that he saw Daniel in the park at 8:10 that evening. They told him, "This kid has no family. No one will miss him." 2 police officers filed a report saying they had seen Daniel the evening of the crime. They suspiciously didn't file a report about this until 2 weeks after the supposed sighting of Daniel. One of these police officers was later found by a judge to have lied in a different case. Daniel's case went to trial, and the prosecutor argued, well, he's confessed, and the bond slip evidence was unreliable, that maybe Daniel had slipped out of the holding cell and then back in, or been released earlier and it was an error in the paperwork. The jurors went along with this ridiculous story. Do you think this would have happened to a white defendant? And Daniel was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. There were some heroic people in Daniel's case, and the two who had the most impact were Steve Mills and Maurice Posley. Steve and Maury were two exceptional investigative reporters who then worked at the Chicago Tribune. Daniel wrote Steve Mills, stating that he was innocent and had the police records to prove it. Steve brought the letter to Maury. They interviewed many witnesses who were critical to establishing Daniel's innocence and wrote many articles in the Tribune about this new evidence. In fact, the first article they wrote was in 2001, and they kept writing articles about Daniel's case up until Daniel was released and even beyond. The witnesses, I'll mention some of them in a few minutes, are a result of their investigation. Even though this evidence clearly established Daniel's innocence, and Daniel filed many different appeals and petitions for habeas corpus and post-conviction petitions from 1996 through 2007 or so, Daniel's case was basically dead in the water. Steve and Maury found a police report that had never been given to Daniel's attorney. The report said that the police had been looking for James Anderson, who had been in lockup with Daniel the night of the murders. There was no report saying that they'd found Anderson. Steve and Maury found him in downstate Illinois. Anderson had been interviewed by police, he told them, and he told them he remembered being with Daniel in the lockup that entire evening. When he told the detectives this, they just stopped the interview and left, and apparently wrote no report about it. I believe that the Tribune articles caused the state's attorney's office to perform a review of the evidence again. In March 2003, they said that the prosecutors and detectives had reviewed the evidence, but still thought the convictions were correct. Can you believe this? It was time for Daniel to get some new legal help. Daniel and Steve Mills reached out to the Center on Wrongful Convictions. This leads us to the next hero in the case, the brilliant and tenacious Karen Daniel. Karen died tragically in an accident in 2019, but I had the pleasure of working closely with her at the CWC for 18 years. Karen, the former director of the CWC, was Daniel's lead attorney and the driving force in his legal quest. She asked me to work as co-counsel on Daniel's case. For the best possible chance to vindicate Daniel, we set out to interview the witnesses Steve and Maury had found. The Center on Wrongful Convictions has students participating in the investigation. One of the challenges with old cases is that witnesses have disappeared or died or don't want to get involved. But we had some great new law students who joined the investigation and helped also with the legal strategies and legal filings, one of whom is here tonight. I remember interviewing Faye McCoy, who had seen the killers fleeing the building, and she told the police that Daniel was not one of the men. Faye knew Daniel and the co-defendants and told the police that they were not among the men who left the building right after the shootings. She did recognize one of the true killers, Dennis Mixon, who had been harassing her daughter, and told this to the police. The police repeatedly pressured her to identify Daniel and the other defendants, ignoring her insistence that she knew them and was sure it wasn't them. Then the prosecutors, getting ready for Daniel's trial, also pressured Faye to testify against Daniel, but she was strong and would only tell the truth. I was impressed by Faye's strength when I interviewed her years later, and I am very happy that she is here tonight. Karen Daniel decided to file another petition for a writ of federal habeas corpus in 2011 and I started working with her on Daniel's case. We were granted leave in October 2011 to file a second petition for habeas corpus. One of our former law students, who was then working at the Seventh Circuit at this time, emailed us to tell us that our petition was the first time the Seventh Circuit had granted leave in this type of case since a federal law had been passed in 1996, making these type of cases much more difficult to win. One thing that is different about a federal habeas case is the state attorney general gets involved. The AG's office then requested the state's file. I will never forget February 14th, 2012, when we were contacted by the AG's office about some documents that had not been turned over to any of Daniel's prior attorneys. The evidence included handwritten notes by Assistant State's Attorney David Styler, who had interviewed several officers from the 23rd District, and the lockup custody records. All this evidence further emphasized that Daniel had been in lockup all evening. We then got an affidavit from the lockup keeper stating that it was not possible that Daniel could have been released earlier. Karen and I were ecstatic about this new evidence and hoped that the state would immediately drop the case against Daniel. Sadly, the prosecutors kept arguing that they needed more time to find the missing file on Daniel's case. We went repeatedly to the court, urging that the state drop charges against Daniel, or at least respond to our argument. On June 27th, 2013, we got a call from the prosecutor's office telling us to come to court the next morning. They refused to tell us what it was about, but hinted that we would be happy. Unfortunately, Karen was on vacation, so I scrambled to contact Daniel's brother David to tell him that Daniel might be released the next day. On June 28th, 16 months after the final hidden evidence came to light, the state walked up to the judge with us and announced that the state was vacating its conviction and that Daniel was being released from Menard by the end of the day. Menard is near St. Louis and is quite a long drive from Chicago. So I, a dedicated former law student named Chris Bernard, and the Bloom Legal Clinic's amazing social worker, Marjorie Moss, jumped into Marjorie's car and drove 7 hours to the town near Menard, where we met Daniel and his brother David and had a joyous dinner at a local restaurant along with Steve Mills, who came, before returning to Chicago another 7 hours, where we arrived in the middle of the night, exhausted but happy. Now, my understanding is that we are now going to see a brief video. In this video, the voice you will hear is Rob Warden, the former director and co-founder of the Center on Wrongful Convictions. There will be a brief interview of Karen Daniel, and it was produced by former assistant director of the CWC, Jennifer Linzer.
In December 1992, Daniel Taylor, a 17-year-old ward of the state, was arrested along with 6 other young men and charged with a double murder near Clarendon Park on Chicago's North Side. The crime occurred the previous month, on November 16, 1992. Neighbors heard someone breaking into an apartment, followed by gunshots. The building manager called police as the assailants fled. It was 8:42 p.m. 2 weeks after the murders, police arrested 2 teenagers on unrelated charges. During interrogation, they confessed to the murders, naming Daniel Taylor and 5 others. Taylor and the others all proceeded to confess, each implicating one another. But well before murder charges were filed, Taylor remembered that he had been in police custody the night the crime occurred. In fact, Chicago police documents showed that Taylor had been arrested for disorderly conduct at 6:45 p.m. on November 16th, almost 2 hours before the murders. And he had been in custody at the Addison and Halstead police station until he bonded out at 10 p.m., more than an hour after the crime. Despite having police documents backing up Taylor's claim of innocence, Cook County prosecutors brought murder charges against him and the other young men. At trial, the only evidence against Taylor was his confession. His defense attorneys presented his seemingly airtight alibi, backed up by his arrest report and the testimony of 3 police officers. But prosecutors argued that the police records were wrong and presented the testimony of 1 police officer who claimed to have seen Taylor near the crime scene that night. The jury convicted Taylor, and the judge sentenced him to natural life in prison.
Although I heard the words natural life, I heard it, but I didn't hear it. It's like, I knew that was a lot of time. That was till death that they wanted me to be in prison. They wanted me to wake up to some bars and die looking at bars. And it didn't hit me right away. It didn't hit me till maybe a few days later, because I was just numb, just like a walking corpse, basically.
In 2001, Chicago Tribune reporters Maurice Posley and Steve Mills interviewed Taylor and began investigating his case. They found new evidence backing up his story, including an interview with a man who had been in jail with him at the time of the murders. Relying on the new evidence, Taylor filed a petition for post-conviction relief, but it was denied. A short time later, Karen Daniel of the Center on Wrongful Convictions began representing Taylor.
Well, the turning point in prison that gave me hope was the day that I got a letter from Northwestern telling me that they had read over my files, and they said that they believed that I was innocent and that they wanted to help.
In February 2012, the Illinois Attorney General's office revealed in federal court that the Cook County State's Attorney's Office had improperly withheld clear-cut evidence of Taylor's innocence prior to his 1995 trial.
Getting into federal court turned this case around. At that point, the Illinois Attorney General's office became involved. They obtained and reviewed the Cook County State's Attorney's file, and in it, they found notes from 1992 that had been written by a prosecutor. Those notes corroborated Daniel's alibi, but no one on Daniel's team had ever seen them. Those notes had been sitting in the Cook County State's Attorney's file for 20 years.
After that discovery, Karen Daniel obtained a sworn statement from the officer who was in charge of the lockup when Taylor was released. The officer said it was not possible that Taylor could have been released before the murders.
In early June 2013, the state's attorney's office was still giving every indication that they intended to fight the case. On June 27th, however, the state's attorney scheduled a court date for the following morning. She didn't say why, but I knew that they were going to dismiss the charges against Daniel that day and that he was going to go home from prison.
Here I sit before you today, a free man, exonerated, cleared of all charges, and received my certificate of innocence.
I try to stay to myself, and I don't enjoy any of it. It's like, I keep that mentality because I think it keeps me focused on what's the task at hand, and that's to eventually get out of here one day. Actually just put me in a room and handcuffed me to the ring on the wall. They was trying to tell me that guys was down there telling them that I had something to do with this case. And I'm telling them that put nobody in possibly said that because I know I don't have anything to do with this case. That was another threat that they used in the room, that I was going to go to death row and be executed. I don't think for the next couple of weeks I was able to actually sleep right or eat right, because I was constantly seeing him on the news and seeing him in different places, and it's always that hope of being there with him, and I know that one day I will get there with him, and we'll be able to do those things together.
I would like to now introduce the authors of this book and the moderator of the panel who will be leading the discussion. Okay, I'm going to call you up one by one. Okay. Lewis Gardner. Lewis was 15 at the time he was arrested, served 15 years. Okay. Dion Patrick. Dion was 20 when he was arrested, served 21 years. Okay. Lewis Gardner. I'm sorry, I introduced him. Paul Phillips, I apologize, Paul. Paul Phillips was 17 when he was arrested and served 15 years. And Daniel Taylor, 17 when he was arrested, served over 21 years. Stuart Channon will be moderating. Stuart Channon, co-founder of the law firm of Channon and Olstein, is an alum of Northwestern Law, has been involved with the Center on Wrongful Convictions for many years, serving on its advisory board as well as the advisory board of the Bloom Legal Clinic. Stuart has been part of the legal teams for several wrongful conviction cases, and in particular, he and attorney Nicole Auerbach, who's also here, represented Dion Patrick, one of the authors of the book.
Thank you, Judy. It is an absolute honor to be here with the authors of Hazel Boyz. And we were upstairs for a while reminiscing about certain aspects of the case, but I want to begin by focusing in on the book. One of the things that the book does beautifully is capture the roundup of the 7 innocent men and boys. You guys ranged in age from about 15 to 20. And the tremendous coercion that went on when you were brought into the police station. Who wants to start by talking about how relentless that coercion was?
Well, for me, by being the youngest, it was kind of rough. As a child, it was scared. I was scared, you know. And by you not having nobody like an adult there to help you, you know, teach you, I didn't know too much, you know, so it was kind of scary.
There's a passage where Paul says, it says, the relentless pressure weighed heavily on Paul. He felt trapped, confused, and scared. The detectives employed a ruthless barrage of threats and promises, each one more terrifying than the last. You'll never see your mother again. You'll never see the light of day again. Do you know how much time people get for this? they get life, and some even get the death penalty. It's no one, and people wonder why it is that young men in that position confess. You want to talk about that a little, Paul?
Yeah, I just remember that when it happened, that they was like using like different tactics, you know, just trying to like get us to confess, do certain things. And when they had my like my arm like handcuffed to the wall, and like I'll fall asleep, they'll keep waking me up, and they'll keep saying who did this murder, who did this, like to see what I confessed to something. Like, you know, when you sleep, they'll try to get you up to say something that you don't really know about. So it was just like really one that really they got me, that they brought Daniel Taylor to the room, and they were just asking him like, if we show you Paul, would you know who he is? And he was like, yeah, you know. So they opened the door and they asked him, is that him? He'll say, yeah. Then they'll move him and come back and say, he said it was you. You know, so it was things like that that they was using to get us to coerce to like something that we didn't do.
Daniel, hi. Good.
How you doing?
It's good to see you. There's a point in the book where that you have like this eureka moment where you're trying to be cooperative, you're trying to answer their questions, and then it hits you that what they're writing down as your statement is completely their own story, concocted own story, not what you've been trying to tell them all along, which is you had nothing to do with it. You want to talk about that part?
For me, their tactics was very surreal. I'm 17. I'm a ward of the state. I'm not really like this gun-toting killer dude. I'm a regular teenager, and I had like runs in with the law, but it was like for petty stuff, trespassing on properties, you know, things like that. So I never had been in a position where I'm dealing with grown men, and not only that, they in a position of authority, and they threatening me, they beating on me, and they telling me that I'm gonna tell them what they want to hear. They telling me I'm gonna tell them what happened, and I'm like, I don't know what happened, but they had me reading other guys' words and telling me exactly what it is that I did. And for me, it was a scary thing because, you know, I really believed them because they the police. So when they told me that they would, you know, I would lose my life, I would be in jail for the rest of my life, that I could be executed for these things, I believed that that's what would happen if I didn't do what they wanted me to do. And like for me, that's life-changing for me to have to go through something like that. I got a kid now that I have to protect, and for me, knowing what's really, you know, what can really happen and go on out there, you can, it's terrifying. But I have to allow my kids to live, and I also have to live and get past that trauma that I experienced back then.
So they had you guys all in interrogation rooms, chained to the wall, the threats of the death penalty or life in prison. And then there was a moment where things could have been set right. And I'm thinking of when they invited Faye McCoy to come in and do a lineup. Which of you were in the Dion, you were in the lineup?
Yes, it was actually me, Daniel, Paul, and Rodney Matthews was in the lineup. But we never actually knew who viewed the lineup. But when they came in and talked to us, they were lying and saying that we had been ID'd in the lineup as the people, actual perpetrators of the crime. So they really were falsifying the facts and telling us that somebody picked us out the lineup when they hadn't.
I want to read one portion of the book. On the other side of the glass was the acclaimed witness named Faye, a respected community leader known for organizing block parties and events that brought the neighborhood together. She was more than just a witness. She was someone who had watched most of the young men in question grow up. When the officers presented her with the lineup, they expected her to identify the young men they had already decided were guilty. But Faye's conscience and deep knowledge of her community wouldn't allow her to be coerced into a false identification. Her voice, filled with certainty, should have been the final word, but it wasn't. And then the book goes on to say that at that point, had they listened to Faye, they could have put a stop to this, but instead they they literally pushed her identification to one side and pushed her out of the case completely. You want to talk about that?
I don't think they ever pushed her out of the case, but I think for 20 to 30 years, like, Faye stayed stern in what she saw, what she didn't see, who she saw, and who she didn't see. And I think definitely in '92, like, Faye was a lot stronger than we was that day, because, like, they pressured her the same way they pressured us. They wanted her to say that she saw us coming out of there, right? And then 20, 30 years later, she was still sticking to her story, and they were still trying to pressure her to say that she saw us come out of that place, and she would never do it.
You guys have been involved in the innocence movement since being released. What is it that you believe motivated these cops to go after 7 innocent kids when they already had so much valid information against the people who were really involved in the murder? I mean, there could be a number of different things. What have you come to believe is the motivation of these cops?
Well, for me, I believe it was, and I learned this till later on, that the case was somewhat high profile. And I think they just got in the position that they thought they couldn't get out of if they'd have just listened to what I said and what Faye McCoy said and dropped it. I think they doubled down on us, and they started, instead of figuring out who really did the case, I guess they chose it was better for them to put something together that fitted us, so that they can get that quick conviction and get that notch on their belt. Because I heard that some of them got promotions once we were convicted.
And I think, to piggyback off what Daniel said, I think a lot of it be the structural racism that exists in our communities as well, where it definitely, I feel like it was a racist factor in it, because as they touched on when Judy was up there, the first thing they said about him was, he's a ward of the state, nobody cares about him. Who's gonna care if he go to jail? And I think a lot of the police that dealt with our case felt that way about all of us. And they felt like it's not their child, so what they're doing don't directly affect them. It's not happening in their community. And I think they just were overzealous. They didn't really care to find the truth. It was just about closing this case. And after their days off, which they did as soon as they came back, and they already knew who they were gonna put this case on. So I think we just were in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Was it that they were so used to putting fake cases on people that in a situation where they had Dennis Mixon ID'd and they easily could have learned who was Dennis Mixon's crew, they had enough evidence of who the real 4 people were who had gone into the apartment? Why do you have any understanding of what their motivation was to just come back from their days off, which you refer to, that memo, and decide, okay, we're gonna just round up 7 innocent kids and put it on them instead?
I think myself, it was happening a lot in this city at that time. Like, I don't think they really cared about the facts. I think it was about who can we put in jail, who could we we could show the community that we've arrested somebody. And they look at us as if we're throwaways, and they don't care, like, because they feel like nobody's gonna care. But unfortunately for them, some of us that have family members and people that truly care about us, that's gonna go to bat for us and that's gonna fight for us.
Good. Paul, are you, one of the beautiful things about the book is spread out throughout the book are a number of poems that you wrote while you were in prison and some when you've come out. Are you willing to share one with us on page 161?
Yeah. Yeah, I had wrote this poem in 2005. It's called Who's Changing? See, I'm really confused trying to understand why the police ain't changing. It's amazing and a shame that I have to look them in their face, because if I let my head hang down, it becomes a spiritual hanging. My beast is what I'm taming. To be released is what it's craving. The protection comes when it's you that needs to be saved, but it's me that I'm saving. My mission is to allow God to have my full submission, because what I have bottled up in my body, I don't get 3 wishes. So listen to this sentence and please pay attention. Their intention to remove black kids from society was their mission. We got convicted. They have no consequences or conviction. I guess black kids are the real drugs in this neighborhood, and that's why the police have a real addiction. And that's called Who's Changing.
Thank you, Paul. So now I want to move on to a different topic, and this is another magnificent section of the book, and I'll direct this to you also, Paul. The courtroom, once a symbol of law, this is right after your conviction. The courtroom, once a symbol of law, now felt like a prison. Paul's world was spinning out of control, everything around him fading into a dull roar. The judge's voice was just noise, the faces in the courtroom a blur. All he could think about was how he would survive the next 30 years in a place where violence was the norm and hope was a rare commodity. Do you guys want to, any of you want to, Paul, you can start us off and talk about that reality of hearing the jury's verdict and then having to move towards prison and start to live a life that you never ever expected for yourself.
Yeah, it's like, you know, to see your family and then, you know, like when it happened and when they had said I was guilty, it's like everything just got blurry. Like, you know, I was more like in shock and daze and stuff. And it's like I couldn't hear no one. I couldn't hear nothing. So in my mind, I was more like, I started thinking about like prison, like, you know, because there's always fights and people getting stabbed or, so I just say like, you know, like I have to like tune out a lot of the world now and just focus like in this type of situation I'm in, because this environment, I'm trying to survive, you know, and try to make it home. So my whole thought process, I wasn't thinking about nothing but just like adapting to the environment that I was in, and I was like, you know, I had to get, like develop this jail mentality to survive. So that was my whole process after that, you know. And even when I had wanted to, I think my grandmother before, you know, she had passed now, but I know she always was trying to talk to me, but they wouldn't let me see my, you know, my grandmother, my mom at that time, you know. So it was like, now I just felt like, you know, I was like by myself. You know, even though like we all was in there, like these my brothers and I love them, but I'm just saying that I was gonna be removed from my family. So I just felt like that I just had to survive by any means that I could, you know. So that was like the hardest moment as far as on that. And I don't think I remember that I was like in a shock. And I didn't hear nobody's voices after that. I couldn't even hear the judge.
Deanne, you were talking upstairs about about the different phases of getting used to life in prison, and you said it was 3 or 4 years before you were able to find your way to the law library because you were just trying to survive. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think like Paul said, we come from a culture of people where we've been adapting for 300 to 400 years to different cultures, being snatched out of our peace and thrown into something else or another environment. So I think when I walked in prison, it was more about how do I make it to the next day? I wasn't focused on trying to come home. I was focused on trying to live. Like, I don't think I saw the law library for the first 3 or 4 years on my bed, because when you walked out that cell, it was like you had to look both ways to make sure you didn't get hit by a car, because you don't know what's waiting on you when you step out, right? And I think in the beginning, as a 20-year-old, 22-year-old, by the time I got to prison, kid still, I was angry, and I think I wanted to hurt somebody because I was hurt. And it took a lot to just get me to wrap my mind around and focus on what was really important in my life, because you start to adapt to the individuals around you. And when you see people doing dangerous things, you start to saying like, I'm gonna protect myself from that. I'm not gonna let it happen to me. And you end up becoming somebody that you truly aren't. But it's almost like you have to become that person in order to survive inside of that place.
Louis, you were the youngest of all the Agatite 7 to go to prison. And you were only 17. You were there, you went in at 15. And then at 17, you got moved, or Dion got moved, but you started to see some of your friends and some of the group got moved to your prison?
Yeah, when I was 17, like we were just talking upstairs, I was in Pontiac, and the worst cell house down there. And by me not having no family, no nothing out there, like these gentlemen said, you had to adapt. And we was like, in that cell house, we was the rebels of the whole penitentiary, you know, and we did what we had to do to survive. And then sometimes you have to come out of that mentality, but it was hard, because from 15 to 17, that's all I knew. You know, I didn't have visitors, I didn't have people at court for me. It was just me. So in order for me to survive, that's what I did. I did odd jobs. We hate to see it, but we fought. We, you know, just terrorized the joint. And one day, some of the older guys was like, man, this not for you. You know, you going way too far. And you go so far where you can't come back. So what the older guys did, they got me out of there. I left when I was like, 18, I think I was like 18 when I left Pontiac. And I had to start getting my mind from that, because anything somebody said, I'd be like, what? You know, and that really wasn't what I was supposed to be, you know. So I learned.
In December of 2001, something big happened, though, that gave all of you hope, and you talk about it in the book. Talk about it beautifully. Daniel, you want to tell us about your meeting Steve Mills and Maury Posley, and what it meant to you when they published Cops and Confessions?
Actually, I met Steve Mills, it was 1999. And my direct appeal, we had filed, they had just denied it. And so at that time, I found out that I would have to file like my own post-conviction and stuff like that. That was terrifying, because I knew nothing about law or how to look up legal cases, how to apply them. I didn't have any of the knowledge that it takes to represent yourself. And Donna Finch was my attorney at the time. She was a PD, but she was my attorney at the time, and we had a conversation before before it was denied and after it was denied, and she felt that if our case stayed behind closed doors, we would continue to be denied, because things didn't start to change until I did meet Steve Mills. I wrote him a letter. Donna Finch asked me to put a letter together and send it to him, and just to explain the evidence I had to prove that I didn't do it. And I did that. And I think we had a call together at some point, and me and Steve, we talked as long as we could. And then I believe he set up a visit with me, and he came to Stateville. We have pictures of that as well. I don't have them with me. But he came to Stateville, and we sat there. He interviewed me. He asked me tough questions. He told me that he believed that I was innocent. And the defining moment for me was when he also told me that he wasn't going to go anywhere until I was free. Now, I was a kid in there. I had basically no support on the outside, zero. So to hear that, because hope can be a dangerous thing when you're in prison. A lot of guys, hope can be a dangerous thing if you build up this great hope and you're constantly getting shut down at every step of the way. And up until I met him, that's what was happening. They were shutting it down. They was denying every appeal, every petition. Even once Steve Mills came on board and started doing his investigative reporting and going to talk to witnesses and pulling paperwork and finding out things that I couldn't find out, they still was denying me. But getting to prison, it was, for me, like most of the guys up here said, you had to prepare yourself. For me, I'd never been to prison before, but I was in the county for some time, so I was able to get a sort of a feel of what I think or thought it would be like in actual prison. For me, I took on an approach where I learned what to stay away from that can get you seriously hurt, and who to stay away from that can get you seriously hurt. And I tried to get around a group of guys that were thinkers, guys that hadn't gave up on life just because they gave them life or because they gave them an amount of years that equal life. And I believe that's what helped me sustain my sanity in there, was being around a group of guys that wasn't all about prison life. They actually wanted to fight and improve their innocence, and I think that's one of the things that kept me focused as far as the legal, on a legal standpoint.
But returning to I heard you say that your hopes had been dashed so many times, but then this series of articles start coming out, and you guys pay homage in the book to those articles, and let those articles tell the story as it unfolds. Tell the portion of the story where they start to unwind all the falsehoods. Did you allow yourself to start to feel some hope as those articles got published and would show up at the prison where you were?
I don't have the words to even explain the hope that rose within me. And there were letdowns, because even though Steve was finding new evidence, finding new witnesses and stuff like that, they still was denying me. So, but me and Steve had a talk, and he said, I can't promise you that I'm gonna get you out, but I can promise you that I'm gonna be here till you get out. And once I got Northwestern University on the team, and I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk about that a little later, the hope stayed there. Even through denials, I still had good hope. I felt good. I had at least two people, well, three, that was listening to me now. And I really believe that they believed in my innocence. And that was Judith Royal, Karen Daniel, well, four people, Steve Mills and Maurice Posley, and Donna Finch. I can't leave her out. But those were people at that time in my life where I really felt like they believed me, they was really listening.
Anybody else want to speak to the hope after these articles started to come out?
I think for me, like when I was blessed to meet Steve and Karen and them through Daniel. And after their first conversation with Daniel, they wanted to interview me to see like what I had to say, right? And the hope that they gave us, like it was life-changing because nobody was listening before we met them. And now they were bringing it to a broader platform where the world was starting to see it. It was popping up on all the news channels. And like to Daniel's point, like, I think one thing you try to do in jail is stay off that roller coaster of emotions, because you can get on such a high, and then you'll fall and it'll be a real low. And I think they always brought that hope back, because that messaging that Steve Mills gave about not leaving until we get out of there, we got from Karen Daniel and the Center for Wrongful Conviction. I got from you and Nicole Auerbach. And I think like that's when we knew that somebody was gonna see it through with us and make sure that somebody stood by us until we walked up out of prison.
Would it be okay at this point if I said that Steve Mills is here today and maybe it's time to give him a round of applause?
I love you, Steve.
So, you all got out, you all got exonerated, you all filed lawsuits that were successful. What made you decide to become exoneration authors?
Me, I didn't want to have them. I wanted them to leave me alone, but
I guess
thanks to these two gentlemen, and then my little brother right here, they convinced me, you know. So I was done with it, you know. But Dion and Daniel say it's time for us to tell our story. It's time for us to let people know, because there's people out there that's still doing the same thing right now today. So they said for people to be aware, you know, because I was in my hole. That's why I'd be in my hole. I don't want nobody to bother me. I don't want nobody to say nothing to me. Half the time I only answer my phone.
So, and when they convinced you to do it, was it at all cathartic? How did it make you feel to be writing, sharing it with each other and writing it down?
I called Dion when the book came. I was like, man, is this real? He was like, yeah, it is real. I was like, man, it's about time, you know.
And then I want to touch on something, right? Me and Daniel have always been in touch because we went through the whole process of the natural life. Paul and Lewis came home after 15 years, right? And like for me, I always wanted to tell our story because I think people have been telling our story for so long and they wasn't hearing it from us. And I think the one thing that's therapeutic for me, I hadn't talked to Lewis in probably 10 years. I've been knowing Lewis since he was 15. And I think at some point we all found a way to protect each other. And it hurt me when I talked to Lewis because for years, Lewis was beating himself up because he felt like a lot of this was his fault. And we had to have a conversation with Lewis about, you were 15. The police did this to us. You didn't do anything to us, nor did you do anything to yourself, right? And I think it allowed us to reconnect because I don't think we had talked to Paul in almost 10 years, right? But now we're constantly reaching out to each other and we're staying connected and in touch with each other. And I think like for us, like there has to be some type of change. Like there's absolutely no accountability for the people that do these things to us. And like people that put us there, these were intentional acts. These weren't mistakes. These were grown men that set out to frame innocent young men. And they still get a pension. They still living their life. They retired, living a good life. And absolutely nothing happens to them. Somebody asked, like, we did an interview the other day, and they asked about the repercussions. The only people get repercussions are the taxpayers. Nobody else do. The taxpayers still paying their pension right now, and they did something bad. And I think until they start going to jail for their acts and start losing those cushiony pensions and stuff, they're gonna keep doing it, because I think it's still happening today. I don't think it stopped with us, nor did it begin with us. And I think, like, we as a society, we have to start really getting behind these type of movements and showing the world that this stuff happens every day. And there's still there's some bad people that are actually being rewarded for this behavior. And it has to stop.
I don't know how we are on time, but if I'm happy to open it up to the audience and come out if people have questions they want to ask. Yes? Go ahead.
How you doing? You touched on a very valid point that nothing happens to the people that put you guys in these situations. What can be done for, like, consequences of these crooked actions? That's me. I'm just really asking that, because that's completely wrong to take like 25 to 30 to 40 to 5 to even 1 year from a person out of this, like, luxurious world. You don't know what you can do in a day. You feel what I'm saying? You don't know what you can do in a day. You don't know what you can do in a week. So to take years from a person because you feel that you have the right to, that's wrong. And it should be punished. I'm just trying to figure out, like, how can we get to, like, punishing people?
Do you guys see a pathway to starting towards accountability?
I think the legislators have to make a change. Like, we can't really change it because we have absolutely no say-so in that. But something needs to be done, because if not, they're gonna keep moving with no accountability and no recourse to what they do.
Was there someone else? What?
The lady up here.
Thank you for your book. Dion also, I don't know how many people know, but became one of the best outreach workers, saved a lot of lives once he became free. But yesterday we were training homicide detectives at CPD, and I just wonder if this case can in some way be taught in the academy, and also to prosecutors as a failure of the system.
I got a...
Go ahead. Ask the next question.
Well, to Tenny's question, I think she wanted to answer. I think that would be perfect. I would be willing to come in and talk, not to leave. Some of my co-authors would as well.
There was a time when the members of the clinic staff or the center staff were doing some presentations at the academy. I know Josh Tepfer, who since left Northwestern, was doing presentations at the academy from time to time. And I think the suggestion of going to the source and educating them about these issues, if the powers that be allow it to occur, is one important way to keep get value out of the book and get value out of speaking directly at those places.
I got a couple of questions, and I got a request for you brothers up there. First of all, how you brothers speak, you speak with intelligence, and to be locked up at the age that you was locked up, it shows that them people couldn't take nothing away from you. And you guys continue. You continue to grow. You show integrity. I want to ask, how did it feel when they finally came and told you, man, you going home?
Yeah, we was at home. I was already out. For me, I answered that question since I was the first one that they freed. For me, it was bittersweet. I was actually on the yard working out and oblivious as to what was about to occur. And I got to my cell. I'm just giving you a quick run through of how it went. They told me I had attorney visit. It was actually attorney call. I got to that phone call. Judith Royal was on that phone. And she asked me, am I sitting down? I said, no, I'm standing up. She said, you might want to sit down for this one. And again, I don't know how much time we got, but I want to just get through the story. So she told me that they were on their way to come get me. The state dropped all charges, and I was exonerated. And this out of the blue. Like Karen Daniel said in the short clip you just watched, in my mind, at that time that they told me this, I was thinking that they still was fighting me tooth and nail. They showed no signs of relinquishing or backing up at all at that point. So to go from, and here we go, another 3-month, another 90-day continuance to you going home, was a big shock for me. But one moment I'll never forget, and I always remember this, is after she told me, like a flood of thoughts, what I'm gonna do, where I'm gonna live. I'm all over the place, I'm a mess. And then I thought about Dion. And this is where things got a little rough for me, where I said sort of bittersweet, because I always thought that when I was released, they would be released that day as well. So I packed my stuff up. I asked one of the officers if I could go to Dion's cell to let him know what was going on. And they allowed me to do so. And I didn't even know how to tell him. I didn't know, like, for me, it's like, okay, I'm going home, but he not going that same day. So it was like, how do I tell Dion that I'm about to go home? And he, knowing he still was gonna be in there at that specific time. And so I just walked up to the cell. I said, "Hey, D." He sat up in the bunk bed, and he said, "What's going on, man?" Dion Smooth with it. Yeah, what's happening? And I almost couldn't look him in his eyes because I felt ashamed that I was going home that day and he wasn't. And he did the laugh he do to kind of brought me back out of it. Man, what's up, black boy? I say, man, I'm going home. They dropped the charges. I'm going home, man. And for me, that was the hardest thing I had to tell them. Because like I say, I always thought that when it came about the same way they took us all in the same day, we all would walk out the same day. And my walk away from that cell, I'm gonna let him explain how he felt when I told him himself. But the walk away from that cell was a heavy-hearted one. A heavy-hearted one, that he didn't walk out that same exact day. And I went, got my property, put my clothes on, and I didn't know that Judith and them had called ahead of time and told them to hold me until they got there. So I'm sitting in the cell, the waiting cell, knowing I'm about to be free. I'm nervous because I'm thinking, well, is this a mistake? And are they gonna reroute and say, no, he's supposed to stay there? So like a lot of things was going through my mind. And so when I found out that they told them that they were on their way and I should wait inside the cell, I'm like, oh no, if I'm free to go, let me go right now. I don't care if it's cold, hot, raining, if I'm free to go, let me out right now. And that quickening, the realization that I was actually about to walk out that gate was tremendous. I don't have the words right now to explain it. I don't think I ever will, because it's just an emotional feeling that I don't have the words to explain. But then they brought me back down to reality real quick. So I'm sitting out there, I'm waiting on Judy and Chris Bernard and Marjorie to show up to get me. And I'm sitting on their property, waiting. Menard's police officers came out there and told me I had to get off their property. I'm like, y'all just held me for 20 years. I can't wait for a ride? No, they're like, no, you got to get off our property. And they meant it. I literally had to go across the street and wait on Judith Roy and them to get there. We call her Judy. I don't want to keep saying Judith Roy. We call her Judy. I didn't want to have to, risk going back in there for not getting off their property, so I went across the street, and about 20 minutes later, they arrived. But I'll let him explain how he, yeah.
Tell them how they tried to recruit you to work there.
So, where was at the restaurant, or was it just before we left? We was at the restaurant, right? Or we was at the restaurant eating. I had a club chicken sandwich, and I think it was it was a root beer. And there was some officers in there, in that restaurant that worked in Menard. And they were, cracking jokes or whatever. They're like, hey, you can come work for us. I'm like, you wouldn't want me to come work for y'all. Everybody escaping.
I want to give Dion a chance.
Yeah, I do too. I want to give him a chance to tell you how you felt.
To react to the both joyful and painful interaction that you have, and then we'll stop and we'll celebrate. Go ahead, Dion.
I just laughed a minute ago because I have a cousin here that gets on my nerves. And everybody don't know it, but she claims I'm a crybaby, and I can see her over there saying it right now, right? But it's crazy because the day Daniel was talking about when he went home, me and Steve had a conversation about it in my last penitentiary interview, and it wasn't bittersweet for me. It was actually sweet bitter, because I was glad to see Daniel go home, but I was bitter that I still had to be there. But my joy came before my bitter, right? And then as far as my day that I walked out of there, I was on the yard with Wendell Robinson, that's sitting right there now, who was a juvenile lifer and who is now the executive director of Restore Justice Foundation. And when they came to get me, it was a lot going on that day. Like, I got moved out of my cell. I thought I was going to segregation for some stuff that had happened in the joint. And so when they came to get me, it was like 6 officers at the gate. And they was like, Patrick, come to the gate. So I tell Wendell, I'm like, man, I'm about to go to SED. He like, what? Because I had no clue, because they had actually told Stuart and Nicole that they wasn't letting me go. They were fighting my petition, and that they were gonna file something to keep me in jail. And so I go to the gate, I turn around, cuff up, they get me to my cell, and they kind of like surrounded my cell door. And they was like, how we doing this? And I'm like, doing what? They like, we doing it the easy or the hard way. I'm like, it depend on what we doing. And they like, man, pack your stuff, you going home. I'm like, man, stop playing with me. And they like, man, you got 10 minutes. Go get Robinson off the yard. I want to get everything out of my cell that I don't want to take with me. And when he came in, I'm like, man, I'm up. He like, what? Because I had been telling him that they were going to file a petition to try to keep me in. And I went, took my shower, I went to property, sat up, and they didn't put me out. They let me sit and be a vi, right? So I waited on Stuart, Nicole, my son, and actually Daniel jumped in the car with them and took that 7-hour ride and came down there. We stopped at a restaurant. I think I found out that people in society are a lot more ruder than people in jail. And I say that because as we was eating, like, they was reaching over my food, and I'm like, whoa, like, what's going on, right? And they were like, no, this is how they do it, like, but it's like, just knowing, to see my son. I left, my son was 11 months old. When I came home, he was 22. And to walk out into that foyer and be able to hug him free, like, he didn't even want to get in the car with them because he didn't believe it was happening. He thought somebody was going to tell him that it wasn't true, that I wasn't coming home. So his mother had to make him get in the car with my lawyers and come out there. And just knowing, like, that we left some real good dudes in there, because I think Robinson came home like 6 years later or 5 years later, and there's still a lot of good brothers in there that don't belong there, that could really, truly get out here and make a difference in society for people. Like, we just have to keep the fight, because we all have took on this collective effort where we all pushing restorative justice, and we just trying to see a different outcome for young black men in our communities and young brown men in our communities, because we really have to remove that stereotype that we don't have the capacity to change, because we do.
As the moderator, I get the last two words.
There's a lady up here.
No, well, yeah, I'm going to take the last two words because there's a lot of good food outside that these people want to get to. My takeaway from the book is that there were a lot of heroes. We mentioned Stephen Morey. We mentioned Karen and Judy. I didn't get to mention earlier that Faye McCoy is with us today, and I think I'd like her to get a round of applause. But the ultimate takeaway from the book is that these four men are the heroes of their own story. They showed so much heart, so much resilience, and it really is, they've gone through so much, and it's been an honor to represent them and to work with them and to read their book. I hope you all get a chance to read it.
We have one more thing. Ms. Berry wants to do something.
Okay. Parking.
Testing. So now we're going to turn it over to our awards ceremony to honor a lot of the brave souls and spirits that assisted these four gentlemen reach their goal of being innocent. So I'm going to pass it over to our authors and pass the trophies.
This will be for Nicole, our Thank you. I appreciate you. Oh. She said you have to take them.
I'm not the star here. Yeah, I'm Nicole Auerbach. The only thing that I can say is I learned more from these guys than I ever could have imagined. Stu and I and John Stainthorpe, who's here, and Flint Taylor, Judy, and of course Karen, and everybody who's worked on these. We work in a system that sometimes is, very rewarding. I do a lot of corporate and commercial work, and then you see these injustices, and you know that you just have to do what you have to do to right the system, even if it's just by a millimeter. And what happened to these guys and what happens to so many people does have to be remedied, and I'm just proud to be a part of that in some small way. When I am on my deathbed, I know I will look back at this case as the one that I'm the most proud of, no matter what I've accomplished in my now more than 30-year career. So I'm truly honored, but mostly I thank everybody who contributed to this in even the smallest way. There's a lot of additional work to do, but thank you guys all for all that you've done to put your words on paper, and we'll continue to tell your story.
Thank you.
This award that I want to present to Judith Royal. I just want to say a few quick words, and I'll turn the mic over to you. I want y'all to know that this beautiful human being, this person next to me, she went far and beyond to help me in this case. What I love about her was she didn't just help me prove my innocence and then say, here you go. They were my support team. They helped me navigate through my early stages of being free on how to find a job, how to find an apartment, how to look up, how to do a lease and everything. So with that being said, I'm indebted to you greatly. I miss Cameron Daniel. I wish she was still here. She would never leave my heart, and neither will you. Thank you so much, and I just pray that you continue doing what you do.
Thank you. No family members.
And we're running out of time. Okay. So she said just try to keep it brief. And then
You're going to cry there. You tell them. Yeah, we want to get us our award to Flint Taylor.
They forgot about you, John. Sorry.
We'll blame it on him. Thank you, man. I don't really deserve this, man. Even John. Yeah, John.
Well, this is wonderful. I want to shout out John Stainthorpe, who, with me and others at the People's Law Office, came in the civil case to represent these two brave young men. And all I can say is that it is just heartwarming to see all of you four up here together as one, and what you're doing now after all you went through. We love all of you, and we're glad that we could contribute just a little bit to where you stand here today. Thank you very much.
I'm going to speed it up a little bit. Well, we're actually running short on time, so we would like to give this one to the Center for Wrongful Conviction on behalf of Karen Daniel. And we just appreciate the Center so much and everything that you guys have done for us. Thank you. Cool.
He was.
This is for my boy over here, Stuart Shannon. appreciate you. I think Steve Mills may have left. We had something for him, and we had something, is Locke here? Locke Bowman. And we also have something for Locke Bowman that we would like to have presented to him from someone as well. And we have something for David Owens as well, and Maurice Posley. And I think in closing, I think from all of us, we would like to thank you guys for coming out and giving us the opportunity to speak our truth, I guess. And I think it's only just the beginning for us. And hopefully this touches someone that moves this message a little further so we can get this needle moved a little bit more as far as stopping this epidemic of wrongful convictions and try to bring back a piece of restorative justice to our communities as well. Thank you, guys.
So when everyone, you want to go ahead and close? In just a moment, everyone can begin to move towards the foyer. We would love to take pictures with each and every one of you guys. Be sure to follow us on social media at the Hazel Boyz, as well as visit the website. Those are where the pictures will be posted at www.thehazelboysbook.com. Thank you guys so very much for your support. This is a celebration of life, so let's clap it up. Thank you, Center of Wrongful Conviction and Northwestern, for your generous support and being a great sponsor. So we look forward to having more events and just spreading this movement.